Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Minor Issues Podcast. I'm Mark Thornton at the Mises Institute. Well, there are a variety of claims out there that the market for silver is manipulated by one conspiracy or another. And there are also claims that that market behaves in an unruly manner, possibly at odds with economic rationality. And while there may be some validity to both sets of claims, the economic theory of joint supply shows why the market for silver might not follow the path of simple rationality. Ironically, the theory of joint supply suggests that the price of silver can get a positive boost from bad economic times, aside from its role as a possible inflation hedge, producing a silver lining of sorts. Now, according to the World Economic Forum, 93.4% of all mined metal was iron ore, and the other industrial metals account for 6.5% of the total. Other industrial metals include copper, titanium, magnesium, nickel, zinc, chromium, and lead. The remaining 0.5% of mined metals are accounted for by the technology metals and the precious metals. Precious metals include the monetary metals such as gold and silver, plus platinum and palladium. And technology metals include cobalt, lithium, rare earth elements, and several others that I've never even heard of. A significant complication for understanding the mining industry is that a large number of mines and mining companies in the mining industry are labeled according to their primary metal that they produce and sell. However, most mining operations harvest ore that contains both primary metals and secondary metals of economic value. Secondary metals, in terms of their economic value, can be thought of as byproducts. In economics, this is labeled joint production that produces a joint product. For example, the Flambeau mine in Wisconsin mined sulfide ore that contained copper, zinc, silver, and gold. Naturally, this complication means that the ore has to go through a variety of processes to break down the ore and separate the various metals into the component parts. A more familiar example of a joint product is cattle that produces both beef and leather. If you produce beef, then you cannot help but produce the input for leather goods. Cattle production also produces beef tallow or fat and bone meal fertilizer. Now, as an exercise in price theory, an increase in the demand for beef will stimulate an increase in the price of beef and eventually an increase in the quantity of beef supplied, all other things equal. However, because beef and leather are produced jointly, this will simultaneously increase the quantity of leather supplied and a lower price of leather. The price of leather goods, such as shoes and purses, can then be expected to fall. Again, all other things equal. I use this type of analysis to examine why the Pope and the College of Cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church, if they could be viewed as representatives for their local economic interest, why they would go along with a decree that Catholics could henceforth eat beef on Fridays. Because back then, the college was way overrepresented from Italy and the Mediterranean area, which produced a lot of fish. This would seem to go against the cardinals' local economic interest. However, I showed data which indicated that those same areas also produced a large amount of luxury leather goods and would have benefited from the lower global leather prices, offsetting the negative impact on the local economy of a decrease in the demand for fish. Many metal ores, the deposits contain multiple minerals that are economically valuable. The ore from these mines are processed in a variety of ways to extract the individual metals, which are then sold for use in a wide range of consumer and capital goods. Recent decades have witnessed an increasing use of rare and newly discovered minerals in an expanding array of industrial and commercial uses, particularly high-tech applications. And while these developments are not as visible or pronounced maybe as the Iron Age or the Bronze Age, they are extremely important and are probably underappreciated by the general public and public officials. For example, most of the supply of cobalt, which is used in lithium-ion batteries and in highly resilient alloys, comes to us as a byproduct of copper and nickel mining. Silver, which was once confined to just coins and spoons and later photographic paper, is currently used in solar panels, advanced batteries, and high-tech electronics. And there are some primary silver mining operations, but the majority of silver supply comes to us as a byproduct of lead, zinc, and copper mining, as well as gold mining. Some companies named for silver, such as Pan American Silver, actually get more revenues from gold production than silver, and also have revenues from zinc and lead and copper. This is very typical of large-scale mining operations where companies can exploit multiple possible revenue streams from the same production process. Other than when states go to war with one another and kill large numbers of people and destroy large amounts of capital, such as homes, hospitals, and businesses, the two worst economic phenomenon are economic recession crises and energy crises, both of which are historically tightly tied to runaway government spending, borrowing, and money printing, or inflation. In a hypothetical manner, let's see what happens to silver prices in response to each of these two events. An economic crisis is defined as a severe, unplanned, overall decrease in the production of goods and services, which is usually related to fluctuations in the business cycle. Here we would expect a decrease in the demand for industrial metals, such as zinc and copper, for use in consumer goods, where they are used in small amounts, and a larger decline for their use in industrial purposes, capital goods, data centers, and the building of structures, where they are used in much greater quantities. Now, if we think about this in terms of an econometric model, with the focus being on the market for metals, such as the price of zinc as the dependent variable, an obvious independent variable would be gross domestic product. So if gross domestic product, GDP, increases, then we would expect the price of the dependent variable, the price of zinc, to increase. However, if GDP decreases, such as in an economic crisis, we would expect the price of zinc to fall as buyers decrease their demands for that metal. As primary zinc mines start to curtail their production or shut down entirely, this also reduces the quantity of their byproducts, such as silver, that they supply to the market. The quantity of byproduct silver is reduced, and this restriction will put upward pressure on silver prices. Note that primary silver-producing mines will try to expand output as a result of the higher price, and the recycling of silver will also tend to increase. But byproduct production, which is the majority, will have an overall dampening impact on supply. The overall effect of the economic crisis will be to increase the price of silver when the price of most everything else is going down in inflation-adjusted terms. The fact that silver is typically a small fraction of the overall cost of production for most of its modern applications, such as hearing aid batteries, That means that producers who use silver in their production process will be relatively insensitive to higher prices or inelastic. An energy crisis typically involves the restriction of energy supply and much higher energy prices, such as that recently experienced in Europe. Higher energy prices have a similar impact on overall production as the impact of higher taxes. A negative impact of a spike in energy prices on the markets for industrial metals, such as zinc, is to decrease the supply of those metals and to increase the market price of those metals. The direct reason for a decrease in supply is that energy for mining, processing, and transporting industrial metals is a very high share of the overall cost of production of these metals. Higher energy prices makes the supply of these metals more difficult and more costly. Therefore, the impact of higher energy prices on industrial metals will diminish the quantity of byproduct silver supplied to the market. And as the quantity coming to the market falls, the price of silver will experience upward pressure. Again, the upward movement in price is bolstered by the relatively inelastic demand for silver as an input into the production of goods. The theory of joint supply therefore shows two common forms of bad economic conditions will actually result in a higher price of silver, a silver lining of sorts. And obviously, this analysis is an exercise in simple modeling that abstracts away from many real-world conditions and is not intended as a prediction or investment advice.